Okay, welcome to the Berea Planning Commission Work and Business Session for our Tuesday, September 10th meeting. And we are going to start off with our work session, a housing learning session. We have a guest speaker tonight, Wendy Smith with Kentucky Housing Corporation. And I would like to let the commissioners know that this is the way we're doing this. This is information for us to kind of take in tonight. We may have some questions, but we won't be taking any questions from the floor or from the public or anything like that. So we're just gonna take in all the information that we can. So, Mrs. Smith, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much. Is the mic on? Y'all can hear me? Or I-
Just be loud. I'm
There you
good
go.
at being loud.
Good.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. And I want to start by saying thank you all for your service to the Planning Commission. I have a background in urban and community planning, and I know how unfun this role can be as a volunteer sometimes, but how important it is also. Also, thank you for having me here. I told Amanda when we talked last week that this is the first Planning Commission that has asked KHC to come speak about this topic, so good for y'all. We've had a lot of community and statewide entities ask us to come speak. Kentucky League of Cities, KCO, the Realtors, economic development entities, but this is the first Planning Commission, so bravo to you all. I have a presentation, but I'm very open to questions or, interactions, so you all can, do you think you need to fool with it? Okay, it's done it a couple times, yeah. It always comes back, so. But I think part of the reason that Amanda asked Kentucky Housing to come was, housing is something you all are mindful about, thinking about, wanting to learn more about, and we have released a series of phases of a study looking at the state's and each county's housing supply gap. We as a country and we as a state and you all as a county have a housing supply gap. I want to preface this by saying we don't have Berea level data. County level is as drilled down as we went with the market analysts that we hired, but our counties are small enough that they're pretty good at representing what's happening, in your local area. So it's not going to give you a fine-tuned set of data, but pretty darn good, as small as our counties are compared to other states, where countywide data might not really tell you a whole lot about your local area. We did this housing supply gap analysis in two phases. In mid-April, we released phase one, which was what's the current gap for Kentucky and each county. And then just today, we released phase two via a webinar that Amanda and Mr. Richards participated in, and which was supported and crafted in part by Ben Livingston, who grew up here in Berea. I learned last week. He works at KHC. And so we released that. We did a public webinar on it, and all of the data, the full report, lots of maps, it's all on our website now. So available to anybody to use as they see fit. We really want this to be available to area development districts, local areas, statewide organizations. We're not trying to hold it close. We want to share it. So I'm going to start in a place that might not make total sense, but hopefully you'll see the thread I'm pulling through this. At Kentucky Housing, we do everything from competing for money and funding homeless organizations that do service and shelter to home mortgages, working with banks and realtors. So almost the whole spectrum of housing we work with, and we do multifamily housing, we do Section 8 rent assistance, we do a little bit of everything at Kentucky Housing Corporation. One of the things that we do along with Louisville and Lexington is every January we count the number of people who are homeless in Kentucky. It is an imperfect count. I'm not trying to say that it represents the actual number, but it does represent trends when you count year to year. And so what you're seeing here is the point in time count over the last several years. 2021 was COVID. We did not do that normally, so I would kind of ignore that. But what you can see is in 22, 23, 24, the statewide numbers of people who are homeless is going up. When you look at how many of that number are actually unsheltered, meaning they are living on the street or in a car, in a tent, you know, something like that in an abandoned barn, what have you. In my county, a lot of times I live in Marion County, it's an abandoned trailer that really isn't fit for habitation, but people might be living in it. What you can see, the balance of state is everywhere but Louisville and Lexington. What you can see is that the number of unsheltered folks has jumped dramatically. Hopefully you'll see that in a second. Yeah. And so, and what we also learned in this data, because we interview folks on this one night in January, we ask folks, where are you staying? How did you become homeless? What's going on? Our numbers of people who are homeless on the street for the first time and who are employed and are homeless on the street are both going up. Those, I think that's my next slide, those are real indicators of something going wrong in your marketplace. When people are becoming homeless for the first time, it's like something's going on. Now, I want to make it clear, there are other aggravating issues that might make a family or an individual become homeless, but the structural issue around it is there's not a unit affordable for them to live in. It's a little finicky, isn't it? Give it a wiggle for me to knock on it. So this is a really important way we are talking about and thinking about homelessness, but not just homelessness, because what happens before you're homeless? Your housing unstable and your housing is unaffordable. Those are things that you might live in for a decade or more before you're ever truly at risk of being homeless or become homeless. Lots of folks are homeless for a very brief time because they're able to get some family help or some government help, like from KHC or one of our partners, and get rehoused. So short-term homelessness happens. Chronic homelessness is a whole other issue and really, really challenging. I'm going to part from homelessness right after this slide, but what I want to make clear is we are talking about the structural market issue that is leading to an increase of homelessness in Kentucky and the U.S., which is when you don't have enough supply, coupled with increasing economic growth, you get a marketplace mismatch where, because there's not enough housing, but jobs are climbing or incomes are climbing, the cost of housing goes up, the supply is not keeping up with the number of jobs and demand for that housing. And so who loses out are the folks who have the least resources because of their income, or they have some kind of obstacle like substance use disorder, mental illness, a domestic split, a disability themselves, all of these issues. And I'll part from homelessness by saying I've got a really big family in Marion County. My mom is one of 12. I have 32 first cousins who live in and around Marion County. We're a pretty good sample of just like what happens in families, good and bad, right? Everyone in my family has one of these issues, with the exception of maybe discrimination, unless it's discrimination against a single mom. Everybody in my family has had a substance use disorder, mental illness, a job loss, and a domestic split. Nobody has become homeless. In part because housing in Marion County has been pretty affordable for a long time. We also have a trailer that my grandpa bought forever ago, and like my mom and I lived in it when she was first a single mom on her own. Everybody in the family almost has lived in it at one point. It's kind of like the starter affordable home just on my grandpa's farm. So that's our like ace in the hole for nobody becoming homeless. Okay, so the reason I want to talk about homelessness is because KHC, we try to serve people and reduce homelessness in Kentucky, but also B, it sits on what we call the housing continuum, which is really also the housing market. We call it the continuum because I don't know, because we got to have a crafty way of talking about it, right? But it's really just the range of housing situations that Kentuckians find themselves in. And so all the way over in the pink, that's homelessness. Those are people who do not have a housing solution. And then you go to the yellow, which is maybe people who would be chronically homeless but have a supportive housing solution where there are services, maybe some rent assistance, and affordable situation. Then you've just got in that light green, the affordable rental housing. Oh, there, Kate, it's back. As soon as you try to do something.
Really having a hard time tonight. Okay, I'm just gonna unplug it, replug it, see it. Yeah. I'm gonna have a
So
little.
if I could ask you.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Well, define what that average median income looks like, well, in dollars.
Okay, if you can,
That you're saying that it's.
yeah, I'm gonna have to look it up because it varies county to county.
Okay.
It is, the way we have it framed is a percentage of your county median income. So folks earning 30% of county median income or below, we consider them extremely low income. You'll see that 30% AMI up there.
Right.
So then for the light green affordable rental, that's people earning 30 to 80% of your county's median income. So we try to tag it to because it's all relative, right? What's considered an okay income in one county versus Louisville could be pretty different. So it's all tagged to that. And in our report, in the addendum, every county has its income ranges listed, as well as what rents or home ownership options we consider affordable to those income ranges. And we do it county by county because we feel like that's more meaningful than trying to do it statewide.
And ours is about just under 50,000.
Is that median income? Okay.
Is it for individual or family or
It's probably household,
Household.
which can be both individuals and families. And so anyway, just the spectrum is just going kind of up income, right? The darker green is people who need an affordable home ownership option. They're earning that $50,000 to slightly below, but it used to be a couple years ago, they could buy a house. It used to be for $125,000, you could buy an okay house in my county, and now there's not one for sale at that price. Even at 150, there's not, unless it's gonna need quite a bit of work or it's been vacant for some time. And then you're going up then even into market rate rental, because there's demand for that. Even if folks have a robust income, they might just want to rent. And then market rate home ownership rate. It's just a marketplace. What we are seeing at KHC, we typically focus on the folks at the 100% AMI and below. We don't typically go very far over that. Sometimes with our home mortgages we do. We're having a hard time serving the folks we typically serve because they're competing for the very same housing units as middle income folks who might be slightly over income because there's not enough supply. People might have to go to their like option B. It's not exactly what I wanted, but I'll choose this house because I can't find the house I want. And then there's a down filtering where the people with the least resources find themselves, or the newcomers, and what we're seeing is younger generations who would love to get a foothold in the community, buy a home, that kind of thing. They can't get a shot at it because the costs are so high.
Just a
Yes,
quick
sir.
housekeeping. Commissioners, if you speak or have a question, please put your microphone on so everybody can hear that. That's
Yeah.
good. It's no big deal, just saying.
Okay, so what are the factors at play that have caused a supply gap in Kentucky and really the U.S.? I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these. I'll just go over them. I could talk about each one for quite some time, but one is natural disasters. And I will say we can tell anecdotally and through some data that Madison County and Clark County are seeing some folks from East Kentucky hit by the floods moving to these counties because they just, they need somewhere to live, they want to be closer to job centers, and they want to get out of flood zones. And it's very hard to construct in far East Kentucky. West Kentucky also had the tornadoes that took away a lot of their housing units, and they desperately need rentals to replace a lot of what was lost. We've got 3 of the past years of record economic growth in this state. So many jobs. And I have to say, every time the governor does a press release announcing more jobs, I get a pit in my stomach thinking, where are people going to live? And my dream would be that, like, for every 100 jobs announced, at least 10 housing units are also announced, because we need some ratio of more housing for more jobs. It's not 1-to-1, but something. We also have, in some parts of the state, really restrictive zoning and land use that makes it really hard to build any housing or any density or certainly affordable housing. We see plenty of NIMBYism for the projects that we fund. But also just the land use and sometimes the processes make it very slow to get housing to market. This is not the reason that we have a housing supply gap. It is a reason. My county has no zoning. My city, Lebanon, does, but my county has no zoning whatsoever. You can build a car wash next to a daycare, next to a church, next to a dump. It's fine. It's whatever you want as long as you own it. So this is not the driver, but it can be a driver. Local resistance is often tied with that NIMBYism. And then the biggest thing, and I'll show you all a chart on this, which is pretty stunning, is the lost capacity after the 2008 housing recession. That crisis and the recession that followed robbed our state and our country of a lot of capacity to build housing. It's like a bunch of gears got ripped out of that machinery, and you'll see we are not even back to 2008 levels of construction of units, single family or multifamily. So that has had this lasting impact on our construction industry. Missing middle housing, I'll show a graphic on that. That is the idea of adding ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which I think y'all are considering or have considered. Duplexes, triplexes, quads, they're denser. You're getting a lot more households per parcel, but you're not wildly changing the complexion of a neighborhood like a 50 to 100 unit apartment complex would. You know, you're getting more density, but it's not wildly changing the nature of a neighborhood. We have had, within the construction that we've had very little starter home construction. And by that, we typically mean homes that are under 1,500 square feet. Right, the first house my parents' first house, now interest rates were 13%, but it was 900 square feet, right? And we didn't know anything was wrong with it, but it was a tiny house, and nobody's building those size houses right now because the profit margins aren't there. We're also not building workforce housing, just for middle income people. The programs KHC has, we build for affordable. You know, home builders do like custom larger homes, more expensive, and there's not much happening for middle income folks. We also have really high interest rates. Let's hope that's temporary, but that has exacerbated all of this, along with the pandemic when construction really did halt for a little while. We have escalating insurance costs, which are really impacting homeowners and landlords across the state and the country, and then slow delivery of units to market. And by that I mean we still do stick-built primarily, and that's slow. And if you don't have enough workforce, it's hard to get a lot of units brought to market. And so we're really encouraging communities to look at, in addition, not instead of stick-built, modular, panelized, and manufactured options for getting units, you know, brought to market, and thinking about how you welcome those.
I don't see it up there, but I'm curious about the impact of investor-driven, right?
Yeah.
Which could be somebody just buying a place for B&B, and that takes it out of the market.
Yes.
And then there's the big-time investors who
Yes.
are buying up housing.
Yeah, so I could have a bunch more slides.
Yeah.
That would be on it, whether it's long-term rentals, right, which are great for the visitor, but it removes a unit permanently from ever housing a resident of your community, right? And around Berea probably experiences that because of the college, and around a lot of our lakes, we see a lot of that too. Louisville and Lexington also. But in addition, I know in Louisville in particular, big equity firms have come in and bought a lot of single-family homes. They're holding on to a lot of them until rents climb even higher, or they are leasing some of them and jacking the rents up. Rents in Louisville have gone up 40% in the last 3 years, which is just, you know, it's unbearable for those households. So there are other factors. We try to focus on the ones that seem to be having the biggest effect, but you're not wrong to bring that up.
So Wendy, would also cost of building materials increasing be part of this list?
Absolutely.
Because we hear it from every developer that comes in here,
Yes.
from
Yes.
a development standpoint.
Because what that does is it means where you can make profit is on those larger custom homes or on low income development that we have subsidized. But for the middle income stuff where you don't get subsidy and you're not making a high profit margin, it makes it really hard to make those numbers work. It's not greed, it's just those projects are not rendering enough margin to be worth taking the risk on, you know, as a builder a lot of times.
What's an acceptable margin
Well,
from a building perspective?
I mean, for us, we allow a certain percentage developer fee, and that's what we allow as the margin, and it's usually 15%. But, I mean, every builder and developer has their own tolerance for risk and return, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the industry standard is, I'll be honest, because I don't do market rate development. So I've talked about the economic growth. One of the things that we keep harping on, we're just going to have to live with it, I think. It's okay. One of the things we keep harping on is this idea that homes are where jobs go to sleep at night. A lot of communities, a lot of states really value jobs, and we will forego any amount of tax dollars to get jobs, right? And we'll build industrial parks. My community has built a lot of spec industrial parks, spec buildings, waiting for somebody to come occupy it. But we don't do that for housing. We don't do build-ready sites for housing. We do build-ready for economic development. We may have to start considering that those things are tied together. per that, I want to make sure that you all know, at the same time we were doing our report, the Chamber of Commerce and the Home Builders Association of Kentucky released a report in July. It is really well done. It is not at the county level, it's at the state level data, but they're really focused on housing because they're hearing from so many chamber members and prospective companies that want to expand or locate in Kentucky that housing and childcare are two of their dominant concerns. The chamber doesn't do anything with housing or childcare. That's really new for them. So we worked with them a lot, just helping them understand kind of dynamics in the housing industry. Their report is great, and it's got a couple of great graphics. I'm only going to share a couple. This is cost burden renters in Kentucky. Cost burden means you're spending more than 30% of your income on your rental housing and utilities. So what you can see is that the dark blue, that bottom band, those are folks who are spending more than 30% of their income. The light blue band on top are folks who are spending 50% of their income on their rent. When you're spending 50% of your income on your rent, you are very at risk for housing instability and then at some point potentially housing homelessness. Because it's just not enough money to pay for childcare, a car repair, a medical thing, groceries. It's just not enough money when you're spending 50%. And it tends to be your poorest Kentuckians who are spending that 50%. So they really, the other 50% or even a smaller percentage that's left at the end of the month after they pay for housing is not much to live on.
Is that percentages? What
Yes,
is-
right. So if you look at the 2022, what this is telling us is that 44% of Kentucky households spend 30% of their income or more on housing. And of that, 24%, roughly 23.9%, are spending half their income or more on their rental housing. It's a really disturbing number to us because to us it means those bar charts on our homeless count are going to go up if we can't gain some ground on this. Okay, this is the chart that really stunned me, and I was jealous. I wish we had put it in our report that the chamber had in theirs. So these are actual permits for new construction, multifamily and single family in Kentucky by year, starting in 1995 and going through 23. What you'll see is that in 08, it tanks, it goes way down. That's the housing recession that I mentioned. What you also see based on those light blue bars, it never goes back up. The dark blue is if we pulled forward the average of the previous years and just said, what if we had just managed to do the average that we used to do before the recession and kept building at that? That's what we would have built. And so these are the units that did not get built since the 08 recession. And so to me, this was this stunning illustration of how, like I said, some gears got pulled out of our kind of construction mechanism and haven't gotten put back in to allow us as a state and as a country to produce enough housing units. And I'm not talking about affordable housing units. I'm just talking about housing units. I want to make that clear. This is just all housing units.
So do you think that 2024 is going to be the same flat line that we've seen since 21?
No, I think it'll be up because there are a lot of housing starts. One of the things our analysts did was collect housing starts data from all across the state to try to understand where construction is happening. But you can see how much catch up we have. Even if we get back up in 1 year compared, to a previous year, we have all of this unbuilt, kind of housing still to catch up on is what I'm getting at.
Amanda, from the last meeting, this is what stuck in my head, so I just want to make sure. I thought I heard you say pre-2008, Berea was building 75 units a year. Now we need 400.
So and so what I did is I took their 1 year analysis and I figured Berea's percentage of population of the whole county. So based on that, it basically said we need to be building 400 units a year. We are averaging right now for the last 5 years, we've been averaging 75. Now, that's just single family, no, hold on, I have it in the minutes. I'm telling you wrong. The 400 was total units including rental. So I think it's more like 100 and,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
So 160, so basically he said
Missing middle housing, I touched on that before. I like this visual, and I cannot recommend enough this book, which is by the company Opticos that came to our conference. I bought this book because I love it. It gives all kinds of ideas about how to allow for more missing middle in your zoning code, in your development code, and what it could look like. Some really great examples of a triplex that you wouldn't know wasn't just a large single-family house. Like really great designs, so it doesn't have to look like something that the neighbors wouldn't like. And it also talks about accessory dwelling units, upzoning, all that kind of stuff. We're a big fan of promoting this because it doesn't require assembling acres and acres of land to do a giant complex, and it also is less likely, I'm not saying it won't be opposed by neighbors, but it's less likely if it's one duplex, quadplex at a time versus a giant 100-unit, rental development.
I read the Chambers report. Well, it's pretty long too.
Yeah,
I can't say. But I did pull out this one thing, and I think it's from that. Housing shortages in the U.S. have caused the U.S. economy to be 9% smaller today than it otherwise would be. This has effectively robbed the average American worker of $6,700 in higher annual wages.
In addition, I keep thinking about I know of so many, particularly younger households, folks who just got married, folks who are just starting their families, who really want to buy a house, and even 5-8 years ago would have been able to buy a house and begin building wealth, who are not. They are just dumping their money in an expensive rental right now. There's a 1-bedroom rental above my gym in downtown Lebanon, and it is $1,300 a month. That makes my first mortgage was $700 a month, and I was building equity, and appreciation of the property. So I really think about how that's affecting. It's robbing wealth building, from our households.
I had a question. So when we look at high density, I think that we grapple with, at least here, or at least I do, the effects on infrastructure. Okay. How do you do that and either expand or at least maintain the integrity of the infrastructure you currently have? Because to me, it feels kind of like an art and a science.
Yes.
And because I see developments that we have that have really taxed a lot of the city's infrastructures, whether it's road, whether it's fire, whether it's water, you name it. Infrastructure to me is more than just roads. So how do you balance that out?
I'll be honest, I think you have to enlist your experts who understand, like, can the sewer line accept 2 households on this lot versus 1? And maybe that's as high as it goes. It's two per parcel is the max you'd be willing to in certain areas, where in other areas there's more capacity and we could accept some tris or quads. I think it really has to be, you got to lean on your experts who can say what the water, the sewer, the roads could absorb. But they're up to the task. They can help you all figure that out. But I don't mean it means everywhere should be able to get a 10-plex and that's going to be fine. It's just going to work out. It does have to be really smart, and it is science and art of figuring out, will this work? Do we have enough stormwater runoff? Is there enough parking? That kind of stuff. But I would say, like, a lot of folks would give up a parking spot or maybe a little water pressure to have a home they can afford. I'm not saying you want to choose that, but I think it's an important balance to try to strike. This is just a chart for the U.S. of that missing middle construction. So again, quads, duplexes, triplexes, all that kind of stuff. The black line is single-family homes, so you can see it tanked at the recession and it's trying to climb back up. But as I showed before, it hasn't gotten back. The orange is apartment complexes, so larger complexes. That also tanked, and it has climbed back up. It's actually probably at or near the previous peak. The lowest line, which is blue or aqua, that's missing middle housing. Quads, tris, duplexes, that kind of stuff. We basically have almost stopped building that in this country. I do think it's going to tick back up because we're getting some, neo-urbanist communities that are a little more dense, but it'll take a lot for it to even climb back to previous levels. Okay, so Now to the data about the housing supply gap analysis that we conducted. We did this for two reasons. I mentioned how our own programs are losing ground. We also started hearing from partners that don't usually talk to us, like you all, economic development agencies, Rotary clubs, the realtors, Kentucky League of Cities, just all kinds of organizations saying, we've got to talk about housing. We don't know what we're going to do. We just got this new factory and they're complaining that they can't hire engineers and managers because there's nowhere for them to live. And I'll be honest, we don't have tools. We didn't even know what the number was, but we were hearing from so many county judge executives, mayors, just so many folks that we decided to do the analysis to at least have a starting point. So phase one, we released in April, and that found that to catch up with what we have not built, with household formation, with migration to Kentucky and economic development, Kentucky needs to build 206,000 homes across the whole state. These are almost evenly broken between rental and homeownership. The top row, it's a little hard to see, 101,000 rental units, 104,000 for sale units. The rental units are mainly for low income folks, that's where the need is. Folks earning 80% of area median income and below, but the homeownership, it's almost every income segment across the board. So then we did phase two and we released that today. Again, all this data is available on our website. What we found was to be ready in 5 years to catch up with all of the job announcements that have been announced, all of the projected population and household growth, migration to Kentucky, all of that kind of stuff, losing units from the market because they're older, all that, we need to build roughly another 80,000 units, 81,000 units. So it's a total of 287,000 units. That includes that 206 I showed before. I don't want to make it seem even bigger than it is. It's the total to be ready by 2029 is 287,000. Again, pretty evenly split between rental and for sale, with rentals being most heavily for the poorest Kentuckians, but the for sale need for units is across many different income ranges. And I'm here to say, build anything except for micro mansions and super, luxury apartments. Even just if we could get more middle income workforce housing, that would help poor Kentuckians, because right now they're competing for the same units. So just even getting more supply for middle income folks, which is sometimes an easier play than building for the poor, would help poor Kentuckians. Yeah.
And you might tell me I'm wrong, or you might provide more insight. But for me, when I think of low income, right? I mean, we all hear the word low income, there's an image that comes to mind. But I'm reminded, of when I got out of college, the kind of housing I was living, right? So over a course of our lifetime, as we go through many different types of housing, personally I started out low income, right? But,
Yes.
as I've gone through,
Right.
Leaded to duplex, leaded to, owning a family home. So when I think of those different housing types like you have up there, I also look at it in terms of what we need over a course of a lifetime as
Yeah,
a
we're
person
talking
and
about
family.
the life cycle of a household, right?
Yes.
You often start out as an individual renting. You might then couple up and try to buy, or you move into a bigger apartment. You add children, you get a bigger apartment, or ideally you buy your starter home. Then maybe if you're lucky, you're able to trade up. Your kids, leave. If you're my parents, you buy 2 homes. But some people then decide to scale down and they want a condo. In my community in Lebanon, there are a lot of older but healthy households who would love a condo, but there aren't any. I mean, there are a couple, but they're all sold. And that my parents moved back to get ready to be cared for by us. They don't need us yet, but they wanted to find a disability accessible condo. It was like, okay, why don't y'all go live on the moon if that's what you're after. They couldn't find it, but they found a house that we can modify if the time comes. But what you're talking about is that life cycle of a household. So there's no shame in being low income, and many of us at the end of our lives, if we're living on Social Security and a pension, we may actually fall into a low income category, but hopefully our house is paid off and we're okay,
Yeah, and I remind myself that whole idea is not linear, right? Because you already pointed out, you may be on that path, but if there's a divorce or a death or
Substance use,
or something
disability.
like that can set you back.
Absolutely.
I think we all do dream of owning our own home someday.
Yeah. I think most Americans aspire to it. There's a lot of talk that millennials and Gen Xers aren't as interested, but part of that could be a byproduct of it's just too damn expensive, so they can't aspire to it because it just costs so much, you know? So I'm not going to go through all of this data. I feel like it'd probably be hard for y'all to read it. I'm just going to highlight that there's a ton of data in this. It's county by county, and I'm going to share a couple of Madison County data points. One is that in the next 5 years, your households are expected to grow by 4.2%. What you'll notice is that puts you in the high range in Kentucky counties. You know, not as high as Warren County and some others, but still pretty high. Every county in this state has a lot of in-commuters. I'm sure that's not a surprise to you all. 53% of your working folks in Madison County come from another county. That's true of almost every county, though. It doesn't make y'all unique. Okay, so what's the housing supply gap? The current gap, so not the 5-year projection, but the current is 2,600 units for Madison County. In 5 years, we expect the gap for Madison County to climb to 6,700 units. So that's significant growth in the gap, meaning it'd be great to get building. Now, this isn't just Berea, right? This is also Richmond. This is influx from East Kentucky, I'm sure. There are a lot of dynamics. It's Richmond becoming a suburb of Lexington because Lexington's so damn expensive, right? Nobody's an isolated market unto themselves. So this is the severe cost burden share of households in 2022, and I want to make sure you all know this. So severe cost burden, you're spending 50% of your income or more on housing. These are renters. 20% of Madison County renters are spending half or more of their income on housing. It's really, really troubling. Severe cost burden for homeowners is 5%, which is still pretty high. That's probably in a lot of cases older homeowners who can no longer afford, you know, their mortgage or their taxes and insurance. We did a survey of your multifamily housing. We did it across the whole state. We surveyed over 100,000 rental units, over 1,200 rental properties. Very, very detailed. Within Madison County, we surveyed 21 different properties representing over 1,700 units. This was our market analyst who called and got all of this data. What they found was that the vacancy for market rate units was 1.3%. That is radically low, you all. And the vacancy for tax credit or subsidized, I got a feeling that government subsidized is an aberration. I'm not sure what, you must have a public housing authority with some problems. What I want to get across to you all is that your vacancy rate overall of just rental unit availability right now, these were calls that were just done a couple months ago, you have 3.5% of your apartments available to be rented in Madison County. We like to see 4 to 6% just to have enough slack for people to move in and out. I'm buying a house, I'm downsizing. There's not enough slack. And what you can see is that a lot of other counties have no slack. There's no units to rent, which means they're gonna move to your county because you've got 3.5%, even though that's not enough, you know, they're gonna come here. We also surveyed available homes for sale in Madison County. And as of, it was a couple months ago, this year, there were only 193 units for sale. That represents 0.8% of your owner-occupied homes in this county. That is incredibly low as a percentage. And the median list price of homes currently for sale is $335,000. That is so damn high. So that's 0.8%. We like to see 2 to 3% vacancy in the home ownership market to, again, have enough slack for people who are moving to town, leaving town, moving up, moving down. Just, you know, you need a little bit of slack for that to be able to happen, and there is no slack in your home ownership market right now. 0.8% is very, very low. So when we look at the current gap, again, for Madison County, it's almost 2,600 units. Broken between about 1,500 rental and 1,000 for sale. When we project the 5 years forward through 2029, again, that jumps to over 6,700 housing units. And that's almost evenly broken between 3,100 rental and 3,500 for sale units needed in the county to get ready for to catch up and get ready for households that will be forming by 2029. And what you can see, just like the rest of the state, the rentals are mostly for your low income folks, that's where the need is, but your home ownership units are spread across many income levels. Okay, so what can local areas do? This is not a comprehensive list. These are just things that we have been recommending and probably have already occurred to you all or you've already discussed. One is to look at your zoning and the barriers to development. I'm not saying do this recklessly, but look at where you could allow for more density, or are there sites that could be rezoned, or it's commercial, industrial, and you could also allow some multifamily. Are there ways to allow, I think you all either have passed or are looking at accessory dwelling units? That's awesome, because that's 2 households on one lot, and it often means an elderly parent, a young kid just leaving college, or a disabled family member who wants some independence have a really good option. The AARP is all about ADUs. They really like that as a housing option and a push. And the state of Montana made it by right. If you own single family house on enough acreage, and it's not huge acreage, you are by right allowed to put in an ADU. And some communities, I was talking with this firm at our conference, are looking at doing what they're calling an ADU catalog of pre-approved plans and designs, where here are, let's just say, 10 to 20 accessory dwelling designs and plans, and if you're building one of these, you're allowed to do it. You can skip zoning, you can skip design review, whatever. You just go to your permitting process. It gives the community some control over how they look, and their features, and it fast tracks so that I, as a homeowner who might be willing to have an ADU, I don't know how to hire an architect and get through all the approvals and everything. I thought that was an interesting approach. You could also look at creating what people call build-ready land or lots, which is just like at the industrial park that's ready for the building to be built. It's you've bought the land, it's rezoned, you get the roads in, you get the infrastructure in, and then you RFP to builders to say, we're looking for this kind of construction. Give us a proposal. Or you just sell the lots to builders and you dictate the design. You could support and promote off-site construction, and by that I mean panelized, modular, manufactured, any of that kind of stuff. And then I really implore you to make sure that your state and federal officials know about your housing issues, because a lot of states are doing some really aggressive things to accelerate their workforce housing supply. Our state has a housing task force that the legislature has formed, but we haven't taken action yet.
So what kind of feedback, Wendy, have you gotten from state and federal officials with the data presented? Yeah,
we have presented to the Housing Task Force a version of this, for our phase 1. I will say that a lot of the legislators said, they thought the market would correct itself, or that there's not really a role for the state, that it's a local issue. So it's hard to say. I'm really good at policy and data, but in terms of politics and that kind of stuff, I don't know how to read the tea leaves, I'll be honest. I feel like it's a clear issue, and you've got the Chamber of Commerce worried about it, Right.
It sounds to me like a kick the can moment, and let's let the local communities and counties figure it out.
Yeah.
Because we don't necessarily want to fool with it.
And to me, it should be a partnership.
Absolutely.
Right? You all do have a lot of
Absolutely.
the power, but they could help make it easier for y'all to get stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I can't remember the bill number that was introduced last session, right? Which for me was problematic to have at the state level to dictate some of these things, right?
Oh, it was pretty sweeping, wasn't it? It was from a
Yeah.
Northern Kentucky legislator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know,
Yeah.
Representative Doan,
Yeah.
about it, because some of this stuff is very localized,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And to make stuff that works great in build up urban areas, Northern Kentucky, like St. Louisville, just doesn't work in
Right.
small communities, right?
Right.
So,
I'd rather see an incentive structure where the local community can demonstrate how it is supporting supply, and that would then garner investment
yeah.
from an imaginary state fund that doesn't exist, but yeah. I do want to make sure you all know, and I brought a copy for Amanda, the the National League of Cities created this housing supply accelerator. Have you heard of it? Well, I printed out a copy for you. I think it's really good, and it can be scaled up for big cities, but can also be scaled down for smaller areas. But it's got a lot of great approaches and ideas. The Northern Kentucky Area Development District is using that to do a region-wide approach to trying to get more housing, because they're running into a lot of obstacles with economic development. I mentioned the whole idea of having like a pre-approved housing plan. You could do that for ADUs. There's a city in Colorado, I ripped this off of these guys' website. There's a city in Colorado looking to have just a pre-approved house plan. So like, it's already, we've got the plans, we've got the designs. If you build one of these houses, you're good to go in certain parts of, Colorado. I thought that was pretty darn cool. I also want to make sure you may know about this, but not far down I-75 from here, Clayton Homes, which is one of the biggest manufactured housing, they're putting in a subdivision. Y'all are nodding. It sounds like maybe you know about it. Okay, it's going to be 51 homes, and they're going to look a lot like this. It's a manufactured product that's called CrossMod, which doesn't mean it's modular. It is manufactured. It's on a steel frame. But it has to have a garage, a certain roof pitch, and a porch built on site, and it will be able to get conventional financing. And it will be real property, not chattel property, which is for KHC very important, because we don't do traditional manufactured housing loans, but we would do mortgages on these houses because they will be real property. We've really asked them to do some events so that folks can go kick the tires, if you will. There won't actually be tires on these houses. But, to go look at them and see what the construction looks like really, and what 50 homes look like together in a subdivision.
What are they projecting the build out time for something like that?
I know that they plan to have an event like in November. That's what they told us, because we would really like to kind of co-host it, invite anybody who wants to come look, cities, counties, builders, because we're trying to get some of our nonprofit and for-profit builders to consider this. I'm not saying it's faster or cheaper, but we don't have enough stick-built capacity to get homes, so we need both stick-built and this. And we would like some of our partners to consider adding this kind of construction to their business model, not getting rid of their crews, but adding this as an approach. I also want to make sure you all know, in Louisville, there is a modular construction factory that will begin rolling out its modules. I think it's early next year. They're called MMY. I don't know if you can tell, there's the governor doing the ribbon cutting. What they do is it's a module, almost kind of like the building size of a manufactured home, but it's a steel frame that can get stacked. So you can do a 4-plex, a 6-plex, an 8-plex, a 20-plex, and they're incredibly structurally sound. And the ductwork, for the wiring, for the pipes, it's all really easy to build because you stack them and run everything the same way. But the finishes can be brick, it can be kind of a modern metal, it can be siding, it can be whatever you want it to be. I think that's a really interesting product, and what I'm all about is I'd like to see more of this stuff made in Kentucky, for Kentucky jobs, but also so if something goes wrong, you know who to go yell at. It's not like 3 states away being trucked in, Okay, so I'll just end by saying, like, if Kentucky and Berea built more housing of almost any kind except for the highest end and highest cost, we would have lower housing costs, higher home ownership, more workforce housing, lower eviction rates, fewer homeless Kentuckians or Berea residents, increased household stability. I feel like the supply gap is the key issue because it's affecting everybody from our homeless providers to our bankers and our realtors. Everybody's griping about supply. It's a moment that we've got this rare unity of what people are concerned about, and I feel like it's not going to fix everything, but it would ease everything. Think about if housing costs went down 6% like they just did in Austin, because they've done so much construction, rents went down 6% in Austin, which really shocked me. I just learned that this week. And I just want to make sure all of our data is on our webpage. It's all available. Amanda, any of you all could access any of it. And that's it.
And that is KentuckyHousing.org. Is that-
Yes, Amanda's got this full PowerPoint, which has all the hyperlinks in it. So if she shares it with you all, you'll have those hyperlinks in the PDF.
Okay.
You're
Thank-
better off clicking that than trying to navigate.
Oh, yeah, I got you, sure.
Thank you, Wendy.
I appreciate it.
I think this is like the third time I've seen different versions, and I've learned something every time from this. You know, one of the questions, I know Man and I have talked about this, is so I come from a agricultural background, right? And the last thing I and a lot of other people want to see is more farmland covered up, right? So, and one of the things is like going, instead of spreading out, going up, right? And we see, Amanda knows numbers, but I don't, right? I mean, but you start getting 3 or more stories and you have to get into the life safety aspect of that, sprinklers, elevators, all this kind of stuff, which drives up costs, right? And I think for a lot of developers is like, I don't want to deal with that stuff, so I'm just going to try to go out. What can we do to incentivize, going more vertical?
So, I mean, you've already pointed to it, which is how do you offset the cost or the perceived friction? That might be cost, but also time, or now I got to find a contractor to put an elevator in. I've never worked with so how do you make it worth going through that friction, and or how do you offset the cost? And so I'll just give examples of what I've seen. You buy the land. So maybe it's land near the town center that can get repurposed for a taller building, right? And so you're going to charge $1 for the land. Well, that's a nice offset. Maybe it'd be worth doing it, right? So it is figuring out how do you create an incentive structure that makes it worth them going through the brain damage or the friction of working harder or doing something they're not used to doing. The other option is you try to find developers who have done it elsewhere, whether it's Richmond or Lexington or something else, where you're trying to get them to come do that format here. But still, I will tell you, they're going to want to figure out like, well, what's in it for me? How can you close? Because sometimes with projects, especially if they're small, if the unit numbers aren't big, then the profit margin might be tight on a multi-unit. And so how can it get offset? Or you all are committed to fast tracking zoning and permitting, and what is going to make it worth their while to do it?
Other commissioners have questions? Comments?
I will say thank you so much.
Oh, yeah,
for
yeah.
coming. I think that, from a city's perspective, we have, really heard what was happening in our community and in our county and in our state about housing, and tried to, at least do the things that we think that we can do, which is look at our regulations, and we've done that, and try to, gather information. So this was kind of a kickoff session for us so that we can learn what the status is, but also try to figure out what services are available. So we do have, just for any community members watching, we have 4 sessions that will follow this in our next couple Planning Commission meetings, where we're going to have Habitat for Humanity and HUD and FAHI and USDA come and speak. And so really just trying to get a good feel for what can we as a local planning commission do to help our community with this. So we really appreciate your time, and certainly appreciate Kentucky Housing Corporation's efforts in this study, because it's going to be really useful for us.
Not good.
Yes.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, and here's your. Yeah, don't lose that. Thank you.
Okay, so that completes our work session. We appreciate Wendy Smith with Kentucky Housing Corporation coming down. A lot of great information there, a lot of things to work through and think about. And, we got more speakers to come, so lots of things going on. All right, business session. We'll do a little call to order. And are there any visitors here that don't have any Anything on the agenda, any business tonight that need to present something? Take that as no, everybody's good. So before you, the minutes of August 27th, 2024.
Mr. Chair, I say we approve the minutes from Tuesday, August 27th, 2024, as presented, please.
Motion on the floor, we have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. And no old business. And we'll go to the new business, which is 100 through 300 Melody Lane, Ellis Land Surveying, minor plat with waiver request for road frontage, more than one additional lot, and transfer within 5 years. So do we have someone here to speak to that?
Hello, I'm Tim Ellis, Ellis Land Surveying.
Perfect, thank you. So just tell us a little bit about what's going on this map of Melody Lane that we're looking at.
Well, we have two parcels, two tracks originally. Track 2, which is the parcel on the northwest, is being consolidated with parcel 1 or tract 1, and my client is wanting to subdivide into consolidate and then subdivide into 3 parcels. The 6 on the north to sell and keep the other 2 parcels.
So parcel 1 to sell? And keep
Yes.
2 and 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the reason that minor plats don't typically come to planning commission for approval, but in this case, the city regulations say that each lot shall front on a public way for 50 feet. So in this particular case, Melody Lane, so if I might, I'm just gonna go to the aerial map. So Melody Lane, I'm not gonna be able to capture all this in the image, but, the right-of-way, the public right-of-way for Melody Lane ends kinda at this curve right here. So what you get is this private road along, what is still called Melody Lane, but not city owned or maintained. It is just a private street. So what I think probably happened is all this was built as and there are duplexes, is that
Yes.
correct? So a series of duplexes built on one lot, probably on one development plan, which was certainly fine because they had private access down their private road. So what the city's regulation says, and the reason that we've written this up in the way it is on the agenda, is because the city's regulation is a little bit complicated. What this has allowed for, we've called it the family farm rule over the years, because the intention, I think, of this particular regulation that we'll go through is that if you wanted to subdivide a tract off that did not have public access, it was a method by which you could, subdivide off a tract of land that did not have this public road frontage. So the regulation says, all lots shall front on a public street for a minimum distance of 50 feet, provided, however, that this provision shall not apply to the subdivision of a single lot, i.e. one additional lot, provided that the lot shall have a legally enforceable and adequate ingress and egress, and further provided that the original parcel from which the subdivision is made shall not have been subdivided nor the title transferred within the previous 5 years. So again, the reason this particular plat had to come, and it does say that if an applicant desiring to invoke this provision shall appear before the planning commission and establish the facts to the commission's satisfaction. What becomes problematic is that it's not just one additional lot, so they would be requesting a variance from this, what I call the family farm rule. And so it would be 2 additional lots,
Yes.
and the title has transferred within the last 5 years. So to approve it would, it would be a waiver to section 508.5.1, in my opinion, in its entirety, for the approval of the plat.
Just a question, how is a private drive applicable to that particular rule?
So it provides, so what they are doing on this plat, they are providing, yeah, thank you, John.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean-
No, you're fine. I said I didn't need one, but it turns out I do. So they are putting on here a proposed 50-foot ingress egress easement. So that will, because this minor plat will be a recorded document, that provides them their legal and enforceable ingress and egress. So that means parcel 3 down here at the bottom always has the legal right to drive on that driveway, right? Now, maintenance might be something that needs to be discussed, you know, in terms of, will there be a shared maintenance agreement between, if the subdivision is approved, will parcel 1, 2, and 3 have a shared maintenance agreement where everyone will be responsible? Will you be responsible for just your parcel? I'm not sure if that's been discussed, but something that definitely needs to be considered if this is approved, simply because, you know, we want to make sure that, again, right now it's on one parcel, one owner. Now those responsibilities will change if that's sold or transferred in title.
You said it's currently one parcel, one owner, or all these duplexes being rented out?
Would the maintenance agreement also include the parking lots and sidewalks as well that are associated with this?
Yeah, I mean, could you speak to what your plans are in terms of?
What we'd like to do, if you will, just come to a microphone, state your name and
Weston Durant, the owner of these properties. I have not put anything into place at this moment. It was something that one of my friends asked me if I would sell him some of those units. He was actually thinking about buying all 24 of them. We then decided, you know, hey, where he was at financially, that he would buy 12. So again, the whole part was to just break those 12 off for him. You know, again, dividing it into 3 parcels is not as big a deal to me as just being able to break it off to sell him those 12, and I could even make it 2 parcels. But if, you know, if that would make things easier for Tim, but that, as far as sidewalks and things of that nature, I haven't even given it a thought.
okay, good. So does that change the mind of the office at all, or do you, I mean, you just,
So, you know, what we're here to consider is this plat.
right?
And so we would be making a decision on this particular plat. If you were to change it, that would need to be resubmitted. And I would just make the recommendation, again, that it would need to, just again, for you guys as the owner, maintenance is something that needs to be considered.
Okay, what would you guys request, or is there anything in specific?
Again, just to, so that with private drives, maintenance is always an issue, so we don't need anything from you, just to know that, just know that you will need to
Okay.
formalize a document that is a maintenance agreement between all the property owners. So that what happens is, when parcel 3 here at the bottom takes really good care of their stuff, and parcel 2 does not, and they're gonna have to drive across some potholes that you guys don't end up in court, right?
Yeah, no, I actually was in partners with some people who in a similar situation where they didn't want to fix the potholes, they didn't want to maintain it, and I was like, okay, I'd rather not be involved. I like to maintain my properties and make them look nice.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but you're selling these, or some of these,
well, I'm selling
so.
I'm selling 12 and gonna
Yeah.
keep the other 12. So I feel like the person I'm selling to maintains his properties pretty
Okay,
well.
and
too,
again,
so.
that's fine, we just wanna make sure that something gets recorded
Yes.
that is that is formalized.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and we try to think 30 years down the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I was told. Every move, think 30 years down the road.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
I'm curious, it hardly seems big enough, like, to get a fire truck down there. Is there any issues with public safety? Fire trucks, school buses, I mean, this essentially is a cul-de-sac. It's not something we would approve today.
Well, the volunteer station's right next door.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was
So
thinking the fire.
Yeah, I guess I didn't, yeah.
So I don't know about the city services, but I really hope the volunteers will respond.
Well, I can tell you from a historical standpoint, when I was on the council from, I guess it was 93 to 2000, I was also on P&Z. And I think this used to be owned by the Dursons.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
And the Dursons wanted to put some speed bumps on Melody Lane. And the fire chief at the time said, if you put speed bumps on there, we're gonna have a difficult time getting trucks through there. So the speed bumps went away. That's what I remember about it. And we were kind of talking about it before this meeting, that I said that I'm almost positive that's a private drive, you know, from the start there, parcel 1, all the way down to the end, which it still is. Why has it, is there any reason why you want to keep it a private drive and not try to get it up to city road standards and see if it could be brought into the city? Is that, or is that something that has not been considered in a while?
It hasn't even been considered by me. I purchased this, I guess, 1.5 years ago from the Dewersons, and honestly, until I had spoke to Tim, I didn't even know it was a private drive.
Yeah, that was kind of news to all of us. So Tim had called the office, and we all, when we first talked about him submitting this, we were all under the assumption that Melody Lane as a city street continued to the end of this. So kind of news to all of us when we started looking into the records of it to realize that it was not city maintained. Now, again, what level of maintenance has been done in the past, who knows? Right.
Well, possibly if good maintenance has been there, then all the renters know when they've called the city for any kind of service that.
If they've showed up or not.
Yep. I would
Yeah,
hope,
that's right.
hopefully they all know exactly who to call to get the streets and the sidewalks clear or whatever, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and parking lots and what have you, right?
Right. Okay, well, any other questions or concerns or thoughts, John?
I do think it would be inappropriate to approve it without a formal maintenance plan for the future owner of parcel 3, even though it's your friend now and maybe somebody different in a decade. And the residents in 200, 202, and 204 deserve a safe way out on a maintained road.
I understand. Question for you: when will we be able to get back on the docket to?
So what could happen is we could do a contingency approval that you just submit that to our office
Okay.
for
that-
recording with this document. So when this gets recorded, you would also record that shared maintenance agreement.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I'm a little slow. I'm sorry. My wife can tell you we have conversations all the time that I don't understand.
So, Amanda, who would review that maintenance agreement and say thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, on it? Would that be you?
So I think as long as it's prepared by an attorney and it covers the high points, again, that we wanna make sure that it is shared between these three, or however it's laid out, but again,
Right,
it
right.
actually assigns responsibility, then I think it could be something that's reviewed by my office and approved, again, recorded with the plat.
Okay.
Yep.
Would it need to be a attorney here, or would it need to be an attorney like?
Yeah, we don't tell you what attorney you have
Okay.
to, we're not quite there where
Well,
we
no,
tell you
I-
what
we
attorney.
met with an attorney here, I guess, what was it, a couple weeks ago. Oh, you want this?
Brandy Durant, other owner. We currently do have a property management company. They do take care of all sidewalks. They salt, all of that nice stuff. So it is maintained, and we would be, holding on to that back 12, and they would continue to be maintained. So what you're wanting from us, I just want to clarify, is just something saying that no matter who owns those 3 separate parcels, that maintenance of the street, as far as keep potholes filled and all that nice stuff, will be equally shared. Is that what
Or
you're,
however you assign.
some
it,
sort of
doesn't matter
agreement?
To me.
It's gonna be all person number 1 and the
Yeah,
other 2.
you may take it all,
Okay.
you may assign it, but when people buy property and they do a title search, and there is a document that says, I'm responsible for this, or not responsible for this, I just want there to be a clear path
Right,
to know, so that they know what they're responsible for.
right.
So we
Makes
don't
sense.
necessarily care how you lay it out.
Right, right.
Okay,
Just that it is a legal document that can be recorded, again, along with this plat. This plat's gonna be the document that gives them their legal access. And now we just want a document that says, okay, you got your access, who's responsible to take care of it?
gotcha.
Okay?
Thank you.
And do we need to have something in there as well for parking and sidewalks
I
and
think it
all
should
that
be
kind of stuff?
inclusive of all that.
All
Again,
that?
Each unit.
Again,
Okay.
maintenance responsibility usually does include all those kind of shared.
Okay,
kind of
because I
spaces.
keep hearing roads, and I get that, but I want to make
Yeah,
sure that we don't forget about, where people park and the sidewalks. they
Are there
use and
street
all that
lights
stuff.
Yeah.
back there?
Are there street lights? Do you remember? I know each unit has its own parking, so they're not parking like on the street, they're pulling into their own
There are
driveway.
not streetlights.
I don't
Yep.
think there are streetlights.
There are lights at the front portion, I believe, near the fire.
Yes, there's one there right across from the volunteer fire department
I believe.
on the southwest side of Melody Lane.
John, not to put you on the spot, but does that sound appropriate to you, or do you?
Oh yeah, I just think there needs to be some kind of plan for the people in parcel 3 to get out of there and make sure the road's maintained.
Yeah.
And I would like it on the record that my wife is the smarter of the 2 of us.
Duly noted.
Yeah, so noted. It'll be in the minutes.
Yeah.
If it's not, I'll add it, okay?
You just publicly admit that over, this is being broadcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can.
I'm here as a citizen of Berea. The only thing, do you all own all the way up to where it is a city street?
Yes,
Yes.
they do.
So they do. That's the main thing that I would always look at, is because sometimes you'll have a separate owner, like at the very end of that piece of property that is before that. So if you do, you need to always include that person in.
Good point. Good deal. All right. So, Chair would be willing to hear a motion on Melody Lane?
I'm not gonna I still have a question.
Okay.
So I understand the minor plat. I think I understand the waiver for the road frontage, right? Where it is up there, and then more than one additional lot and transfer within 5 years. I don't understand that.
So in my opinion, this would be a waiver for, again, basically the section in its entirety. And maybe I'm not understanding your question, but I think the waiver request is for the entirety of section 508.5.1 for lot lines. And that includes those provisions for, our regulations say you can have one additional lot that does not front on a public way. So this would be 2 lots, and that the title has not transferred within the previous 5 years, which in this case, what I understand is not applicable because it has transferred. They said they bought it from the Duersons 2 years ago. Oh, a year and a half ago. Okay. So it will be a waiver, in my opinion, of that section 508.1, 508.5.1 in its entirety. Now, I think why the 5 years was put in there is, again, I think the rule was intended for a family farm where you could cut off a lot, an acre, that did not have 50 feet of frontage for your kid. But you could not do that, but you couldn't form an illegal this is really an attempt to not illegally subdivide or do a major subdivision and call it a minor subdivision, right? Where you just keep on subdividing and subdividing without putting in that infrastructure. I think that's the intent of the code.
When was that code put in?
That's been in there a long time. I think that has been since the early 90s edition.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do remember it, and I think that if my memory's correct, current council member Ronnie Terrell Sr. wanted to do something similar to this for one of his sons or both his sons or something. But that seems to be what I kind of recall.
Yeah.
When this came about.
That's what I think that is for. Yep.
I would like to make a motion approving the minor plat of 100 to 300 Melody Lane with a waiver request, waiving section 508.5.1 of the City of Berea's Land Management and Development Ordinance, provided they provide a satisfactory maintenance agreement to Amanda's office.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion before we go to vote? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion will carry. And that completes our new business.
Thank you all.
for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
I make a motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? We are adjourned.